Staggered last month when two congressmen claimed that a significant proportion of the armed forces in Vietnam regularly used a variety of drugs from marijuana to heroin. They also claimed that high-ranking officials in Saigon were deeply involved in drug trafficking to the American forces.
How did this happen, you might ask? Well, opium is grown in regions right near where Vietnam is, and all three of the major political parties in South Vietnam, which was the Democratic Vietnam the United States were backing, were researched by American journalists and academics showed all three of the Democratic parties in the South were heavily involved in getting raw opium, turning it into H, selling it on the streets to U.S. GIs.
A narcotics researcher testified today that Indochina's heroin traffic is tied directly to South Vietnamese leaders and to foreign gangsters. Alfred W. McCoy, a Yale graduate student, told a Senate subcommittee that South Vietnam's heroin and opium traffic is divided between the political organizations of President Thieu, former Vice President Nguyen Cao Ky, and Premier Tran Thien Kim.
Every man leaving South Vietnam now is tested for heroin addiction. These GIs have completed their Vietnam tours and are getting ready to go home. But before they can leave here, they'll have to submit urine samples.
A congressional report has estimated that 10 to 15% of American servicemen in Indochina are heroin addicts.
And at that time, I had found out that my brother's a heroin addict. I already knew that. So I decided to take the cases. You know, I'm still a federal agent, even though I'm supposed to be organized crime.
You can buy the drugs.
So I started buying the drugs and working with the then Federal Bureau of Narcotics, making cases. And among the earliest one of the first cases I made was a guy who I had paid to introduce me to a gambling organization. I hit him up I said, look, can you give me a connection for smack, teca, they used to call it. Tecas, manteca's butter, they used to call it on the street, teca. I said, can you give me a connection for teca? I'll give you a couple of $100. I got a good customer. I don't have this guy takes me to up in Harlem. I'm going for my first buy ever in heroin. And I go to the foot year. This was 1966. And I go to the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. Their office was downtown. They only had 250 agents in the world. And I tell them what I'm doing. And they say, well, that's great. They said, the Italians are running this stuff. See where it takes you. And they come out and they cover me. So I meet a couple of African-American movers in a Harlem bar with my informant Junior. He brings me in, says he knows me for 100 years, you know, and I used to speak with man, you want to do this? He goes, I don't know, you know. I was an actor already. I was doing my Puerto Rican vibes, and
there was probably no Puerto Rican undercover agents. So
there were none.
So if you could successfully just pose as Puerto Rican,
yeah,
that was it.
Oh, I had no problem. I had no problem posing as a Puerto Rican with Puerto Ricans. So,
yeah.
So I'm in the bar, and we make a deal. I didn't have any money then, because they maybe would have killed me right there. I was so innocent, but if I had the money on me. So I'm bargaining with them. I say, you're a kilo, we talk prices.
Oh, this is a big deal.
Kilo, yeah, it was huge.
Oh, so this is your first one. So this is a guy you met on the street.
Yeah.
And you didn't buy...
I met on the street, introduced.
Okay. But you didn't buy a quarter ounce. I mean, you went straight.
I went right for a kilo at a time when a kilo was the biggest case you could expect. Next thing, he goes and meets his connection, the black guy. He goes and he's followed to East Harlem, Italian Harlem. They identify who he's meeting with. That's FBN.
They know who he was.
They were like, at this point, I just forget. You know how many years ago?
But it was somebody who was already in their registry.
Oh, yeah. Major player. That's when I started getting a little bit of an education and understanding that all the heroin was coming from Italian sources. Jewish, too. Italians and Jews, but mostly Italian.
Charles Saragusa recently retired as Deputy Commissioner of the United States Bureau of Narcotics. For 8 years, he was Bureau Supervisor in Europe.
And the mafia gangsters of organized crime control the heroin racket in the United States. They make arrangements for the procurement of this heroin through the Sicilian mafiosi in Italy. They in turn contact, negotiate, and obtain heroin from the Corsicans in Marseille and Paris, France.
Does the mafia then control the distribution of French heroin?
It very definitely does. It controls the market in the United States. It also controls the source, which is the French Corsican gang groups in Marseille and Paris.